Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Welcome to this morning's session as part of the Climate Education Hub. My name's Elliot Whittington. I am Director and Lead for Systems Change at the Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership. For those of you who don't know CISL, the Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership, we are a department in the University of Cambridge. And we have been part of the, we have been running for over 30 years, and we have been part of the journey for business and in terms of educating business around sustainability for 30 years, essentially. So we have been training and educating a wide range of businesses from around the world, business individuals, working with communities, and helping them on this journey. That's part of our mission in the university as a public sector institution. So we're very pleased to be here as part of the Education Hub. There's been a huge range of interesting and exciting sessions here in the Hub, talking about all sorts of different aspects of education, and we wanted to shine a spotlight on the role of business. So that's what we're going to talk about. We have a 90-minute conversation today. We're going to talk about business education. We're going to talk about what the role of business is in the transition to net zero. We'll particularly talk about both of those aspects with relation to smaller companies, SMEs, because I think there is a lot about, as we think about it, so it's really important to engage corporates, but it is also really important to engage the broad range of business, the 90% of companies that are smaller or medium-sized companies who also need to go on this journey if we are to deliver the transition to net zero. We have a range of speakers that we're looking forward to hearing from today, and we'll be running them through a series of panels as we cover this story in terms of what we're able to talk about. So this is me, but you don't need to hear from me too much longer, because I'm going to hand over to one of my colleagues who is able to talk to, Beverly Cornaby, Program Director within CISL, and she's going to chair a panel including John Reves, who is Vice President for Business Engagement at WBCSD, and Antoine Sarr, who is the Head of Company Engagement and a member of the Executive Committee at BNP Paribas. So Antoine, John, if you can come up and join Bev, and we can take the conversation forward.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Elliot. And I'm delighted to be joined by John and Antoine, if you would like to take a seat. Antoine, would you like to take a seat as well? So my name is Bev Cornaby. I am Programme Director at the Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership. I have been at CISL for now nearly 12 years. I actually started on the education side, so I was actually, supporting businesses through actually running some of those education programs. So to me, this is very important that education is actually a part of a business journey. And what I'd like to do is explore with both of you. I know that John, you're one of our alum as well, and also Antoine, that your company, we've engaged with you over a number of years in terms of actually, running education programs. And certainly actually before I moved over to working more on policy, I was involved in some of those. And what I'd like to do is just explore with you, some of the things that you see in terms of the opportunities for it and the role within business, really kind of putting them on their right path in terms of their decarbonisation journey. So, John, I'm going to come to you first, just in terms of to get you to introduce yourself, but also say about, how you're working with business and also where you're seeing kind of businesses making their commitments to net zero.
Hi, it really is a pleasure to be with you all today. So I work for the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, where I'm the Vice President for Business Engagement. And my day job is to ensure that our 220 members really engage in all the work programs across our organization. But we actually also, as you probably know, run an education side of our work. And so we are deeply committed to this journey of education to help and support the business transformation.
Fantastic. Thank you, John. And Antoine, can I ask you just to introduce yourself, but also just talk about, what are the commitments that you've made as a business to net zero?
Yes, so I'm Antoine Cyr, Head of Company Engagement at BNP Paribas. We call this company engagement because we created this before Chief Sustainability Officers were created. So that's, we kept the name because it encompasses all the sustainable transformation of the company, ESG, but also the transformation of the culture, because we believe that the transformation of the culture and the transformation of the processes have to be really intertwined. So that's why we do it like this. And of course, training have been a core for us from the very beginning of this journey, because our commitment are commitments which are embedded in the reality. For instance, when we decide to reduce by 25% our financing of upstream oil and gas between 2020 and 2025, you really need to create a team, and you need to create a team with the proper training. We have a complete team of climate analytics who is able to convert this into client decisions. So on one hand, you absolutely need to have all the specialized skills. It's essential. On the other hand, you need really to transform your workforce. So we created with the Cambridge Institute for Sustainable Leadership a program that started almost 5 years ago, more than 4 years ago, for all the client-facing people. We train more than 1,000 key people of the bank through this program, which is a very demanding program. And we also started to train all our workforce through short programs about climate change and about all the sustainable transformation.
Brilliant, thank you. And in terms of, those programs, and obviously you've sent a number of staff through them, I mean, what do you see as the difference? How do you see that staff, what is the impact that it has on them?
The impact is essential. We try to do 4 things. The first thing we try to do is to have everybody in the company aware of climate change, aware of IPCC reports, aware also of biodiversity issues, aware of the increase of circular economy, aware of social inequality issues. So we want that none of the 190,000 employees of BNP Paribas in 70 countries ignore this. And by the way, we don't want a company with climate skeptic. So you may be a BNP Paribas employee and be climate skeptic, but it will be really a problem for you, because you will hear all the day and will be faced with trainings that are explaining what is happening. So if you are completely deaf, you may have not understand in which kind of company you are, but it's very unlikely. So first thing is to have this all staff training. Second thing is to have all the people who need skills to have exactly the proper skill to accompany the clients. For example, we are leader in sustainable savings, so we want everybody to be able to advise clients on savings. We have created a low carbon transition group with 250 senior bankers working all the day for sustainable transformation of the large corporates. So we need them to have the best skill to do this. So we need to have the professional skills. So that's the second point. First point, all staff. Second point, all the required professional skills. Then we have a third thing. We need to train all our managers to embark all their colleagues into this transformation. So we are working on kits for the managers to make bankers of a non-sustainable economy, to make them bankers of a sustainable economy. And finally, like every large company, we have a lot of talent programs. We have a lot of programs to determine what are the leaders of tomorrow, and the trainings for them has to make very clear that being a leader in BNP Paribas is being a leader in sustainability. Maybe 20 years ago, we would absolutely make sure that they would have followed a high-frequency trading course, and today we will make sure that they are very good in sustainable business.
Fantastic, thank you. That's very thorough. I might come back to you on the climate skeptic point, because I'm interested to know whether actually, there were any that were climate skeptics that have kind of really shifted as well in terms of actually some of those. But John, I just want to ask you, as one of, you've been through one of our programs. I have to say, I should admit, I myself have been through our postgraduate program as well. I had the opportunity to do that internally within CISL. And I felt, as designing programs, I knew some of it already because obviously I was designing that in, but I still, it still made a difference to me in terms of my learning. I mean, how would you say it's made a difference to you in terms of your own journey?
Sure, I'm more than happy to comment on that. So I was part of what's called Cohort 5 on the Sustainability Leadership Masters Program, and I can only endorse it and encourage others to consider it. I took the course very simply because I'd started working in the field of sustainability, and it was clear that you get to a point, exactly as Antoine is describing, that you have responsibilities inside your organization and you just simply don't have the skills and the capacity to deal with the issues that you're confronted with. And education is particularly from an academic, well-known academic institution, is the best way to actually raise your internal skills and capabilities. It's not a short-term thing, so exactly as Antoine said, I think this is part of the nurturing that has to happen in an education process, that it does take time to absorb. So in my case, it was the 2-year master's course alongside my day job, and that really helped and supported me, and therefore I was able to bring the best of what I'd learned back into the organization and help and support the transformation that we needed to achieve at the time. And we see this inside the World Business Council for Sustainable Development with our own membership as well. As well as trying to address some of the critical issues in the sustainability field, we can only do that if we're able to support all of our members in their capacity needs. And that is increasingly a key part of how we see ourselves as an organization. And exactly the same, I really want to just echo what Antoine said. We're no longer putting that capacity into the sustainability teams. It really is across the whole of our members' organizations, whether that be in marketing, finance, legal, supply chain, all of these roles. They want to know how to deliver on that ambition. And that's where we've got to. There was no longer a discussion about what we need to do. We all need to just work out how we're going to get it done. And for those, we have people with great functional skills, but they need to understand the language. They need to understand the frameworks. And then I'm sure we'll be discussing a little bit more about what that means in a net zero context.
Yeah, and certainly, I mean, picking up on the skills point, I mean, there's been many different discussions around the need for, increasing green skills, and that will require education on many different levels. And certainly I was having conversations last night about actually starting from the lowest levels, so primary, secondary level, and actually how do you get people into the kind of roles. But then, like you say, it's that broader business. We need everyone to have that understanding across a business, not just those that are within the sustainability team. And I'm interested, Antoine, because you mentioned about, not having climate skeptics. You can't have climate skeptics in the business. But did you have anyone that actually, you saw go through the programs who was more skeptical and therefore came out of it really kind of, that it transformed their thinking? Did you see examples of that at all?
Well, you have 2 levels of climate skepticism. Climate skepticism can be just believing that there is no global warming or that the human activity has nothing to do with it. So this kind of climate skeptic, I believe that they left the company in 2017 when we stopped to finance specialists of unconventional oil and it was really an important business decision because we had about we are very active in the US and Canada, and we had about $4 billion of credits on such players, and suddenly we took the decision to make this amount go from 4 billion to 0. So it was a very important signal. Still, there is another kind of skepticism, which is and of course this decision, some people were really against it, and they left the company and went to work to other banks. But this is one example. But then you have I would say a more discrete kind of skepticism, which is believing that okay, there is a global warming, okay, there is something to do for climate, but then it has nothing to do with my clients and nothing to do with my business. And this one you can really address through training. You can, and this the way to address it through training is twofold. First of all, you can explain that. You can explain what is happening. You can make people understanding what is happening, increasing their skills, and they understand that if you give this signal, if you feel the need to give them this skill, it's because it is important for the company. So it's first signal. And second signal, they really perceive this as something that empowers them to have client discussions linked to climate and sustainability. Because before you did that, they could believe that clients would not be interested. And suddenly you give them trainings that are anchored in client examples, and then they understand that it matters for the clients. And finally, so that training allows them to do this. And finally, the last layer is not given by training, it's given by the real action, by client-facing relationship. And I have tons of anecdotes of bankers who told me, okay, so now I am trained to talk about sustainability and to accompany my clients in their sustainability journey. I'm okay. So we are making a meeting with them, but honestly, I'm still not sure they will be interested. And once it happened to me with a Swedish client, and the banker brought the Swedish client to me, and he told me, you know, I come to you with this guy, but I'm not sure he will, because now I'm more comfortable with sustainability, so I can do this. But I'm not sure that he will be really interested. And the conversation started, and the client said, okay, what makes the difference at BNP Paribas is that you are trained for sustainability, you understand it, and suddenly it was a game changer. And the banker was like this, because suddenly he discovered that we had really given him tools that are very useful in the business.
So I have a question, because that's talking about how you're using it within the business and how you're engaging with your clients. I mean, do you think it's helped you accelerate your, in terms of the actions that you're doing on your net zero journey? Do you think you would have got as far as you have without doing that education?
Oh, but it's a real transformation process. So in the beginning, a minority of people are concerned, and you have to create a community that will spread the word around in the company. So that's the first step. And then you start, for example, I know that you are working for SMEs. So BNP Paribas in continental Europe, we are a leading bank for SMEs. And we are now proposing to our SMEs to accompany them to their energy efficiency journey. and this is sustainability. And suddenly we need to train all the bankers and to have everybody. And tomorrow this will be the same for mortgage loans. So we started with large corporates. Now we are into the process with SMEs, and before the end of 2023, it will be a very serious topic for our individual clients over Europe, because in UK we only have corporate clients, but in continental Europe we have 15 million of individual clients, so it's also a big deal for us.
And we will come more into later in this session, with my colleague, we'll come more into actually SMEs and actually how we can support SMEs actually in terms of both education and certainly through the SME Climate Hub and some of the tools that are available. I mean, John, I'm going to come back to you. I think in terms of, you know, what you're seeing in terms of what businesses are doing and actually how they're engaging their supply chains, which obviously is the point that Antoine is making there. And actually you seeing them use, you know, what tools are you using them see in many ways in terms of, you know, doing that? And are you seeing education as being a key part of that?
Yeah, perhaps I can give an example from inside our work. One of the projects that we run with around 80 companies is to help them on their decarbonisation journey. And we quickly found out that there is such a thirst for mutual learning actually from each other. That we created a format of what we called master classes, where we really have a few introductory elements on a particular topic, but we actually leave our companies to work together and share their own experiences of what has worked, what hasn't worked, and they actually open up within a safe space. And that's the gift that education gives. It allows people to take them out of their day jobs and give them this opportunity to learn from each other and upskill themselves. And they feel that that's a major part of what they get from being part of the project, even though it's not actually part of, if you like, the content side, but it is giving them the tools and the ability to talk about the real challenges that they're facing.
And I think that's quite important actually, and certainly when I did the postgraduate course, the opportunity to discuss with others from a range of different businesses and actually look at the challenges they're facing, the challenges, the opportunities that others, or the kind of how others were solving it in some ways or addressing it. Actually that mutual learning was really beneficial, and I think that's something that shouldn't be downplayed actually, of that opportunity to kind of sit back and reflect, actually, how do we address some of these challenges? So,
and we all know we need to scale up these solutions quicker. We're so impatient to see them done, and our businesses are in exactly the same way. They are now impatient to see the implementation side happen. So we have a working group of supply chain managers, and their desire to learn from each other what's worked, what hasn't worked, what are the carrots and the sticks, and they have a monthly opportunity to share, and they're all experimenting, and that's what's great. And sustainability has given permission for businesses to talk to each other about these things. So yeah, it's a very important part of the work that we do.
And Antoine, I'd be interested to ask you, so obviously one way in terms of learning is action learning, so as they're obviously doing their roles, have you seen examples where people have gone through the course and then continued to learn through their roles and continued to kind of explore that because actually they've seen the benefits of that kind of learning process?
Sorry. Actually, what is very interesting and complicated with sustainability is that, we are bankers. So we are, I would say, compared to the average, we are a bit more disciplined. Banks normally, except sometimes you can see rogue things, but in the real life, banking is a relatively bureaucratic and disciplined industry, and people are used to follow the instruction by the book. When there is a process, they are comfortable. When there are instructions, they are comfortable. And of course, they make their decisions because they have skills, and at the end of the day, it's a very human work. But it's grounded on a lot of training, a lot of processes, a lot of instructions you tend to follow by the book. And at one point, in sustainability, they are expecting to have the same. But it's impossible to have exactly the same, because the standards are still nascent, because there is still a lot of complexity to understand what to do, because the UN SDGs are not a 1,000 pages book with extremely precise instructions. So for all these reasons, sustainability is coming, how can I say this, less finished than the other disciplines. And when you go into it, and when you start to really work with your client, you discover it. And you discover that a lot of best practices, a lot of good things can appear from the ground. And then you discover that the experience of your colleagues that started earlier than yourself is a very interesting and a very precious experience. And then you start to ask for meetings, you start to ask for workshops where you can be confronted to the experience of your colleagues that started earlier. And that started earlier because they had trainings that make them comfortable with the matter and made it possible to start earlier. So so for example, at BNP Paribas, we created a Sustainability Academy that encompasses all the trainings of the bank, including the CISL trainings. And we say that this Sustainability Academy should be a kind of shared app that would also make much easier people to participate to workshops, to share their experience, to create groups, and to make it as interactive as possible. So sorry for my answer, it was a bit long, but the short answer to your question is yes.
Brilliant. And I suppose in that way, you're making me think that it opens up conversations and actually opens up, kind of dialogue probably within the business that actually may not have happened before, and that therefore it kind of gives permission for it as well, which I think often, I know we've observed through CISL, the education, people say, well, they're interested in sustainability, but they didn't necessarily talk to their colleagues about it. And actually that, the process of going through it often together, which is what obviously you've done, putting colleagues through it together, not necessarily separately as it is on the, the masters or the postgraduate or the kind of some of our other programs, means that they've got that mutual understanding of what each other has been through, and probably actually they're talking about things that they may not have talked about before. And I'd be interested to know, just as we're coming towards the end of this part, but I mean, what do you see as the next steps for yourself in terms of BNP Paribas, and actually how you will continue to use education on your journey?
Well, we are a very large company, and now we still have a difference between some areas of the bank where you could go ask the people about sustainability, and they will tell you 2 hours about their trainings, about their clients, about how they feel. And there are still areas of the bank you would go to people and say, oh yes, I don't know exactly what it is. So it's what is really important is that we make sure that everybody, every business, it's spreading everywhere. It's spreading. For example, if you see our IT, honestly, people used to believe that banks were building and money, but I believe that banks are rather people and computers. So IT is absolutely essential. The yearly budget of BNP Paribas in IT is 6 billion euros per year. So so we need, for example, to have the IT people absolutely aware of the sustainability issues, and not only the sustainability issues linked to climate, but also sustainability issues that can be linked to social inclusion. Because, for example, we run a lot of programs that help us to integrate refugees that become able to do IT programming and that can catch up and have a very good working situation in the bank. So this is part of sustainability also. So we need to have all the banks ready to do this. Yesterday we inaugurated in France a college that is really dedicated to this kind of social inclusion through IT. So it's we want to spread it everywhere in the company. We need also to make all our senior bankers, they are really becoming specialists of sustainability, but we have also our advisor for individual clients. We have to spread it to them. It starts to being spread, but there is still a lot of work to be done. But they have now in our retail banking network, there is a compulsory training about sustainability for every employee. So it will take a bit of time to be unfolded with everyone. So again, to make a shorter answer, I will be happy when everybody is really has really benefited from trainings and is really up to date and start really the best practice in terms of knowledge.
Brilliant, thank you, Antoine. Final question to you, John. I mean, what advice would you give to businesses in terms of the role that education can play in their decarbonisation journey?
Well, this is a topic where you need to understand how different functions interrelate, different sustainability issues, whether it be climate, nature, inequality, how they interrelate. And to do that, you need to be properly equipped as individuals. And without the education, we're not going to get there. Our businesses. I mean, I think what we're hearing from BNP is a very progressive model, really that is embracing the whole of your company. That is obviously game changing. We don't see that. That's best in class for sure. The key thing is to make sure those that are actually having to deliver on the strategic objectives as companies have the right skills to do that. And I'm sure we're all aware it's difficult to recruit staff who have that sustainability training. So for those of you that embarking and in mid-career, there are so many opportunities in the sustainability space. And that is because there is a shortage of people with the skills. And so it is really critical, and we've seen it in BNP, that that training is happening inside the company because it's difficult to find it outside. But for those companies that need those skills, they have to build that capacity inside their own organization. So I think for those involved in business education, this is going to be a rich field for many years to come, and the world urgently needs it.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, John. Thank you so much, Antoine, for both of you for sharing. And I'm going to hand back to Elliot now for the next part.
Thank you, Bev, and thank you for the whole panel. I thought that was fascinating, and it just really demonstrated how climate education is good for business, it's core, a critical business function, and it is something that where you can see it turning up in all sorts of ways, whether it's from the kind of the core business strategy through to kind of bringing people on board with the way the world is evolving. So I have very much to do apart from hand over to another excellent colleague. So I'm now gonna pass over. So we've talked a little bit about the core role of CISL's corporate education. Now we're going to talk a bit more about the SME space and our innovation space with Jisoo, who is our program manager in our Canopy Accelerator team. Thank you.
Thanks, Elliot. And I think it's been fascinating to hear from John and Anthony, not only your personal experience, but also your thoughts and the initiatives that you've been leading on. So, in my view, I think education comes in different shape and format. Some of them are formal education that you get a qualification or certificate by the end of that. But if you're a believer like me, a lifelong learner, education or learning happens everywhere. So I'm Jie, I'm part of the Accelerator team. I want to say hi to everyone joining in person and also people tuning in online. I understand that there are probably a lot of people who couldn't be here in person, so hi to all the online audience as well. What I'm going to talk about in the next roughly 10 minutes is to tell you a bit more about the accelerator program that I have been running. So those accelerator program, in my view, you can also say that it is a form of education, that we provide incubation, we provide mentorship, and we provide bespoke support to startups. That's great. And then before I go into the Cambridge specific, I want to just zoom out a little bit, because I understand at COP we have a global audience. So what I want to point out is this Cambridge, London, and Oxford triangle. We call it triangle, right at the heart of England. It is really the intellectual powerhouse in England. And that's the reason why I want to bring it out. So you can see between Cambridge and Oxford, that forms a strategic arc. And including those two universities, there are still 10 other higher education institutes in that area. And those figures, I'm not going to go through all of that, but you can see how that intellectual powerhouse can turn into economic growth. Then if we take a step, a closer look into the Cambridge ecosystem, you might have heard of the word, the Cambridge phenomenon. We have Silicon Valley in California in States, and in Cambridge, people call it as Silicon Fan. It's more because of the geographic area over there. But if we look into all the innovation ecosystem in Cambridge, we can really group them into 3 areas. The first one is around the space and infrastructure. So Cambridge have this fantastic ecosystem for deep tech and healthcare industry. You have some big companies, but a lot of them, there are probably more than 5,000 companies and startups, SMEs, are based in Cambridge. And apart from AstraZeneca, Arm, Microsoft, they've got their own headquarters. A lot of them are actually based in those innovation park or science park. So that is the group, provide space and infrastructure. Then you have a second one, is provide the skill and the talent. Of course, there are 2 universities in Cambridge, but also because of this intellectual powerhouse, so it draws, for example, Microsoft set up its R&D center in Cambridge. And ditto AstraZeneca, they also have their headquarters and R&D center based in Cambridge. And then the third one is really about the support and service. Because of this growing need for the business, that's why you have venture capitalists, you have consulting firms or accounting firms attend to the growing needs of those business. But this is pretty much, as I mentioned, Cambridge is known for its deep tech and healthcare. But the next big thing for Cambridge to win in is sustainability innovation. And when we talk about the sustainability innovation, we know it is a convergence of different disciplinaries and technologies and arts, all come together. But what is lacking in Cambridge now is that kind of a hub to provide the space for the community to mingle together. And that is where we come in at CISL. So early this year, we launched our own incubator space, which we call it the Canopy Accelerator. And what we're trying to do is to provide a sustainable workspace for impact-focused and purpose-driven startups and SMEs to collaborate and thrive. So there are 4 key things. We provide the community, we provide the workspace, we will run a series of events, and that's all done through the membership. So how does it look like? So this is what we call it the Utopia building. And it is also CISL's new home. Half of the building will be the Canopy Incubator. And we, early this year, launched this building. If you lived in Cambridge or happened to visit Cambridge in the past couple of years, you might have seen this big, this big sign over there is saying, this is not an ordinary project, but it needs to be. And what we're really trying to do there at Canopy is to create that innovation ecosystem to bring everyone together. But I think that there are 3 key, very unique strengths that we're providing here. The first one is, think about half of the building is CISL staff, lots of them holding tremendous knowledge about sustainability and network. So the first advantage is all the startups and SME, they can tap into this intellectual powerhouse of CISL. And then the second key point, the second advantage is we also provide this arena for startups and SMEs to pitch their idea to a group of people who are really well informed, but also expert in this area. But at the same time, they will be critical and will challenge the solution. So that would be the best ground for experimenting some business ideas even at the early stage. And for us, the purpose of our Canopy, it's going to be far from being a traditional ivory tower that we only do traditional training and education. We want to turn that into a living lab on the Cambridge High Street. So our office is, the address of our office is #1 Regent Street. So it is really right at the heart of Cambridge, opposite of the Cambridgeshire Local Council. So we want to turn that, we want to open it up to allow this open and radical innovation, happen at Canopy. So I caught up with my, our director of the Canopy. So he also recorded this video, tell you a bit more about why and the vision of our Canopy space.
For over 30 years, the University of Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership has worked with leaders in business, government and finance to provide leadership and solutions to global sustainability challenges. Now we're opening the Canopy, which is a community of impact-driven startups, entrepreneurs and innovators who are building ventures that have potential to tackle those global challenges at scale. As members of the Canopy, they will find the connections, knowledge, support and workspace here in the heart of the Cambridge cluster, which will help them on their journey for impact and growth. They will join CISL's global network of over 27,000 leaders all around the world on every continent working on sustainability issues. Since 2020, we've been running focused accelerator cohorts on sector issues such as the built environment, on net zero, women in sustainability innovation, and now circular economy disruptors. These programs provide focused support they need in their organisations.
Okay, perfect. That's great. But what I want to say is we work with startups and SMEs. That's not the only thing we do. If we think about how many SMEs out there, according to some statistics, in OECD countries, more than 70 or 80% of the business are actually SMEs. And together, they kind of contribute more than half of the carbon emissions. If we only focus on those startups or SMEs, we are losing the big I wouldn't want to call it the market, but we're missing a big thing, part of the picture. So how can we engage SMEs and startups at a scalable space? That's where it comes into our online training courses. So I'm going to quickly go through that because this is a quick example of what we developed last year. It's called Climate Fit, and it's really a free online training program for SMEs. And it's targeted at those established SMEs at the beginning of their journey, trying to get their head around how can they decarbonize, where do they start. So this is the purpose of this course. And we co-developed this course together with our partners, BSR, and also SME Climate Hub. So really, this is a program, this is the online course we built with SMEs and for SMEs. The reason why I say it is before we started this whole content creation, we surveyed more than hundreds of SMEs, not only just in the UK, but also in India, America, Southeast Asia as well. We try to understand what do they need the most, what would they like to see in that program. And there are two things really coming out of that survey. A, they want an actionable checklist. They want to know what can they do from tomorrow. B, they want the tangible case studies. So they can learn from other people, either successful experience or some lessons learned along the way. So that's how we developed a really step-by-step guide. And it covers 7 modules. I will talk a little bit more in that. And then we turn that into something very interactive and practical. And then it's, of course, free and open to all SMEs. So we now offer the courses in both English and Spanish. There's also a plan to get it translated into multiple languages so it could reach to a global audience. So each of the, as I mentioned, it covers 7 modules. It's really bite-sized. Each module or each block is between 20 and 30 minutes. And it's very action-oriented. Those are the 7 different modules. It covers, strategy and governance, which is the key point to start with. We need for business to understand where is the North Star of their business. The second one is the operation. How can they think about improve the energy efficiency of their premises, reducing the emission through their supply chain? How can they think about design for the net zero? Then how can they get the finance? Last 2, but also quite important, is to engage its people and the community, and also tell the story to the world as well. I'm probably going to skip this one because of the time, but this is the key thing I want to share is how can SMEs or startups access to the online courses. So it is on the SME Climate Hub. If you just Google SME Climate Hub, sign up, and then create login, that is the suite of tools which is available. So not only climate fit education, you can also see their business carbon calculator, financial support guide, 1.5 business playbook, etc. The idea is to turn SME Climate Hub become a one-stop shop for all the SMEs. And one thing I want to share is we create these online courses during pandemic, and everyone's under lockdown. So a lot of startup SMEs were really eager to learn. So we want this learning experience to be fun. That's why we call it a climate fit. So excuse the pun, the fit in terms of you go to the gym, you do the training. So we reach out to a group of champions, Olympians, and ask them to be the guide or to be the tutor of this program. And those tutors will guide all the SMEs along the way. So this is one of the fun videos we recorded in what we call, well, I will let them explain that.
All right, can you hear me? Is it working?
Looking straight at the camera.
¿Por qué lo no?
How's that?
1, 2, 3.
I think we got it. Ready now.
Hi.
Hi. Hello. Hello. Hola.
G'day.
What's good, fam?
Where are you right now?
At your desk?
On your sofa?
In your bed?
Wherever you are, whichever part of the earth, you will know we're facing a big challenge.
Climate change.
Net zero.
Saving the planet.
Or should I be saving the human race?
It's overwhelming.
It's huge.
Massive.
Masivo.
What do you do?
When are you supposed to do it?
Who's gonna help you?
Where do you even start?
It can make you want to switch off.
But you know what? Don't.
Small to medium enterprises make up 90% of the world's businesses.
Fact.
That's a big team.
And if we all play our part, we can make a big difference.
And by watching this, you've already started. Well done.
Woohoo!
Now, we're going to get you climate fit.
Climate fit!
Ah, who are we? We're athletes.
Sports people, Olympians,
Paralympians.
Basketball champions.
Sustainability champions.
I'm kind of like a mermaid.
And we will be here to coach you through every step of the way, all 7 of them.
and through these 7 clear, achievable steps, we will help you stay focused on the big goals.
Switch away from fossil fuels.
Use less energy.
Create less waste.
Less pollution.
Be more inclusive.
More diverse.
Not just do less harm, but do more good. Build up your business.
For a net zero future.
It's what customers want.
And it's what the planet needs.
And the best part is, you don't even have to get out of your chair yet.
Or your sofa.
Or your bed.
You don't even have to get dressed.
So, are you ready?
Okay, let's go.
Let's go.
Let's go.
So, this is what they call sustainable filmmaking.
So that's it. There are a lot of those fun videos as part of the module. If that could entice you to sign up and have a closer look of the program. But next thing, of course, we're talking about the SMEs. It wouldn't justifiable if we can't hear the voice from SMEs. So before this session, I caught up with 2 SMEs and I've asked them what are the challenges they are facing and what do they think the help needed. And their key message from COP27 as well. So let's have a look. Can you please?
I'm Rory Brown from Green Pixie. We're a UK-based software company, and our goal is to measure and reduce the enormous carbon emissions of data centers, cloud computing, and digital activity. We formed during the pandemic, when a microscope was put over the huge spike in remote working, video calls, and internet use. It shocked us just how energy-intensive the sector is, and how little it's really discussed. I'm here to talk to some of the challenges and opportunities that SMEs and startups are facing on their path to net zero and the hidden issue of digital carbon. As one of the many companies that form every day in the UK and across the world, how have we at Green Pixie managed the challenge of net zero? To be honest, it's been difficult. Even as a company formed to help others reach net zero, we're not exempt from the day-to-day struggles all startups face when trying to balance emissions. The greatest challenge to reaching net zero as a startup is something which is critical and finite: time. Our wider mission is to build software which will ultimately save thousands, even millions of tons of CO2e emissions, but we had to build it first. In our first year, we weren't perfect, but there's a lot we did and a lot that all companies can do, even when time is short. One of the most powerful things is to communicate. There are countless people out there happy to share their time and experience. CISL have provided us with answers to many questions and have fostered a community around them with startups that offer help at the drop of a hat. We've also massively benefited from the UK-based Tech Zero, a group of nearly 300 tech companies in the UK with net zero strategies. Tech Zero help companies to form, communicate and reach their targets by sharing guides, handbooks, discounted tools, events, expertise with companies of all sizes. So if you're a startup and you're grappling with the balancing of emissions and company development, seek out the right voices and resources to help you, and you'll find there are things you can do today that are quick, effective and proven. Now I want to talk about some of the fundamental changes that are needed in the way we look at company emissions. I'm speaking to you today at COP27, and back in 1995 at the first COP, internet use was still a luxury for many. So it's essential to recognise how different an SME looks now compared to an SME formed at the first COP, when most of our corporate frameworks are being formed as well. Many people in the climate community still think of companies as big, deep-rooted, largely physical corporations. However, amazingly, within a very short time, all of the UK's most recent successful tech companies have formed almost entirely remotely, meaning they have no physical presence. We can have billion-dollar companies now with perhaps no office, all in the cloud. How does this fit into the current language of scope 1, 2, 3, upstream, downstream, is almost irrelevant to our new generation of industry. For us at Green Pixie, a largely remote team creating software, our scope 1 and 2 is close to negligible. But the same cannot be said for our scope 3. Scope 3 emissions are now often a company's most significant, ourselves included. This means that modern SMEs and all companies must actively seek to understand their scope 3 or risk hugely underestimating their total emissions and never truly reaching net zero. For us, our main source of emissions is cloud computing, and luckily that is exactly what we're building tools to solve. We produce software that measures emissions stemming from a company's cloud computing usage, emissions that stem from data centers. Estimates attribute 4% of global emissions to the IT sector, equivalent to the entire aviation sector. Data is the 21st century's biggest commodity, but ownership of digital emissions is being thrown around like a hot potato. We must begin to address our digital carbon emissions. To take the example of Ireland, 14% of the country's electricity last year was consumed by data centers. 14%. The International Energy Agency predicts data center consumption in Denmark will triple in the next 2 years. And it's not a bad thing, it's essential. Digitizing current industries is undoubtedly saving emissions elsewhere, but that doesn't mean we can ignore its own carbon footprint. The first step is always measurement. How much are we emitting from our cloud usage? The fact most companies can't answer that shows the accounting gap that we're facing. The second step is reduction, and there again comes the beauty of cloud computing and digital technology. We can reduce emissions from our laptops, from behind our screens. We can make remote decisions to do this. No travel, no construction. This should be the easiest challenge to solve, but that hot potato is being kicked down the road. So with ever-increasing digitalization, digital carbon emissions aren't going anywhere. We might be able to imagine a future without oil, but one without the internet is inconceivable. It's therefore time for every business to take action to confront, understand, and reduce the contribution of our digital activity. We all know the challenges facing SMEs. A lot to do to reach net zero, not a lot of time, not a lot of money sometimes. But as I've said, there are people and resources to help you along the way, and I encourage every startup to take advantage of those. As a digital carbon activist working for a startup specifically tackling this new frontier of emissions, I believe that it's so important we nurture startups and all companies from their beginnings and help them to consider digital emissions. Without this, we may find the net zero achievements of the future are built on flawed foundations. This is the implementation COP, and now is the time to confront digital carbon and implement the solutions that are out there.
From fashion industry.
Hi, my name is Sabina Rachinova, and I'm the founder of the sustainable fashion and lifestyle brand Sabina. We are based in London and have been operating for almost 8 years now. Our focus are synthetic-free garments, and we also offer educational content because we want to make sure that the consumer really understands how to consume consciously and responsible. So we offer them a podcast, workshops, and a range of events. We want to make sure that we take them with us on this journey so they also know how to vote with their wallet. So in the past years, the fashion landscape changed a lot, but also society changed, the world we live in changed drastically. We went through a lot of unpredictable moments. It isn't really easy these days to run your own business, especially as an SME, especially focusing on a social cause. And I think the biggest challenges and issues we had was particularly with our supply chain, because the prices of raw materials are constantly changing and just being very unstable. And of course, we always had the challenge to keep our supply chains transparent, but also navigate through new rules with things like Brexit, for example. So we used to produce almost all of our garments locally in the UK, but Brexit changed that situation a lot, meaning that we had to look for other manufacturing partners outside of the UK, looking towards the European Union, as we also sell to countries within the European Union, but also things like importing and exporting goods became just way more difficult for SMEs. So we had to actually change the location of our warehouse, of where most of the things are shipped from. Again, this went from the UK being now in Austria, for example. And of course, there are other things that we are slightly worried about, but also equally excited maybe. Of course, we are aware of the European Green Deal that will come through very soon, and other regulation changes that we have been looking forward to. And now we're also trying to understand how can we navigate through those as SMEs and what kind of rules will apply to us as businesses. I think for SMEs, it would be incredibly helpful to have support from organizations and even the government as well, to be able to navigate and really understand to how we can not only align with all the new regulations, but how can we actually be at the forefront of what we do best, is basically experimenting and testing and seeing how we can push sustainability to its true nature, actually, and what it's supposed to be without all the greenwashing around it. And it would be great to have hubs and like a more community-based approach, so we can exchange knowledge with others, that we have somewhere to go if we have questions, especially as resources are usually quite tight when you run an SME, right? And we operate with very small resources, very small budgets within very small teams, and quite often that can be also a lack of expertise within your own company, so you would love to outsource that and understand who you can ask these questions. And I really realized that, especially during Brexit, and when there was so much chaos and so much uncertainty, to really understand where can I go, who can I ask all of these questions. And while there are some organizations doing incredible jobs, I think that there is still lots of room for progress in that sense. So we can actually create hubs and create solutions for SMEs specifically, where we can learn and use certain tools, especially digital tools, to make this journey slightly smoother, and especially transition between the changes that are happening and the endless VUCA environments that we find ourselves in.
That's great. And I think the next one, I'm going to invite, two experts, and we're going to have a bit of like a panel discussion, a bit of reflection on the SME engagement, especially from the corporate perspective, engaging SMEs through the supply chain. If I could invite Michelle and Matt on the stage, please. Thank you. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm delighted to have both of you sitting on the panel. We probably got about 20 minutes, so hopefully that's going to give us enough time to deep dive into some of the challenges to come up earlier. But the first thing first, I'd like you both to introduce yourself, and also with the question is, why do you think it's important for large corporations like Microsoft and Ericsson to think about or engage SMEs, especially along the supply chain? Matt, would you like to go first, or Michelle?
Okay, so I found the mic. So I'm head of sustainability at Ericsson, and I've been working for the company for quite some time now. And I think for us, we have 24,000 suppliers, and that is not a lot. That's quite a small number if you compare with most other big companies. So the other companies that we are cooperating with in some of our programs have 100,000 suppliers or even more. So I think SMEs are hugely important for big companies in many ways. And at the same time, we need to work actively with all of them in a way, and that creates a lot of problems for us because we, at Ericsson, where I'm head of sustainability, we have really good life cycle assessments. We know exactly where our emissions are. And in the supply chain, we have around 150 suppliers that are responsible for 90% of our emissions. And 150 you can work with in sort of in a good way. But if you talk about 24,000 suppliers, you have to do it more digital, I think. So we use our own tools in a way to work with that. And we launched a report called Exponential Roadmap. And you talked about the SME Climate Hub, which is funny because Exponential Roadmap was sort of the starting point for the SME Climate Hub and for the supply chain leaders and the 1.5 degree playbook that you had on the screen earlier. So it really started off at the time when companies like Ericsson and Microsoft and other big companies, at the time maybe some 100 companies, but now a couple of thousand companies that are active in climate work, they met at the same companies at all conferences, and then we say we have to work in a different way. But we can put requirements on suppliers, but it's impossible for them to meet the requirements if we don't teach them how. So that was sort of the starting point of the SME Climate Hub, and we said that we have to also work together and gather as many as possible on that and make it free and easy for the company. So that was sort of the starting point for us and how we think about working with SMEs and why education of SMEs, like the training that you have done, is super important, and just using it as on a free hub like that, I think is a fantastic idea. So yeah, thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Michelle Patron and I lead Global Sustainability Policy at Microsoft. And small and medium businesses play a critical role in every part of our sustainability strategy. So we've set these big commitments, and now we're really focused on execution. And that really involves three things. It involves getting our house in order. It involves developing solutions for our customers and our customers' sustainability journey. And it involves enabling the world to reach its sustainability goals, which are fundamental enablers, are markets, skills, and policy. And like I said, small and medium businesses are critical to each of those parts for us. Getting our house in order, we heard the important role that technology plays in addressing climate change, including the emissions that come from our operations. We've set a goal to be carbon negative by 2030. As part of that goal, energy is an important part. We've set a goal to get 100% of our energy from renewable sources by 2025. And our renewable strategy and our energy strategy is not just about procuring local energy, but it's supporting the local grid and making sure that we're providing backup power where there's additional battery storage. We provide to the local grid, heat to provide to local communities. So making sure that where we operate in Europe and around the world, we're able to do that. And as part of the rest of our commitments, small and medium businesses are huge in procuring sustainable aviation fuel. Many of the companies that sell sustainable aviation fuel are small startups. We've set a goal as part of our goal, we do a lot of removal procurement. The removal procurement that we do, we set up RFPs. Many of both the companies that apply and that we end up procuring from are small and medium businesses. Obviously, partners play a huge role in our ecosystem and being able to develop the digital solutions like the Microsoft Cloud for Sustainability that lets our customers, small and big, enable them to track and account and report their carbon emissions. And in the third part, markets, policy, skills, they're also critical stakeholders. Two examples I want to provide. The Climate Innovation Fund. We have a $1 billion innovation fund where we're looking to really catalyze the technology solutions. All of our portfolio companies are small and medium businesses. Many of them are startups. And then we recently partnered with 60 other organizations, including CISL on the carbon call, to build reliable and interoperable accounting. And that's really an initiative that is going to benefit all companies, especially small and medium businesses, to make it easier and more accurate to be able to report their carbon emissions. So as I said, small and medium businesses play a critical role in each part of our journey.
Yeah, thanks for the sharing. I think there are two things I want to just pick up on. A is both companies have very bold commitment. And you're really well aware that we need to bring SMEs along on the journey. And both of you mentioned about the digital, that transition could be enabled by like digital innovation. And Michelle, you talked about the innovation investment fund on innovation. And I was wondering, Matt, can you also give us example, like how you work with some SMEs on the supply chain and how that digital innovation like unleashed that positive change for Ericsson?
Well, I think one thing that comes to mind, maybe not so much on only on SMEs, but we are working very close with SMEs when it comes to the solutions on the IoT that we are driving. So the providers of sensors and other things. And one of the things that we were driving, where we worked close with several SMEs locally, was in the Philippines, and where we set up a connected system. We connected the mangrove trees locally. We used the local communities as part of that. So in essence, we increased the survival rate of the saplings from 40 to 80% by connecting them and making sure that the local community got information on when they needed to go water or protect it or do something. So I think that is a fantastic story on how we worked with SMEs locally and innovations locally, but also local community in creating that. I think also another part, maybe that we don't think about so much, which is hugely important in Africa, where there are lots of innovation, and in fact started as that was a lot of startups in Africa around local LNG, so the electricity grid locally with solar power. They use mobile money for their financial solutions. So then our technology is really the platform that enables electrification in rural areas and also enables micro insurances for local farmers that are hit hardest by the climate change. So both on sort of the resilience building and adaptation side, as well as on sort of the mitigation side. We see a lot of innovations based on the mobile wallet platforms.
Great. And I was wondering, Michelle, like from Microsoft perspective, how do you like engage startups? Let's say if their startup has a brilliant idea, they approached you, and what kind of opportunities or how would you explore the opportunity with them, or do you have a certain framework or mechanism to help accelerate those innovations, especially from the startup?
There's a lot of work that happens across Microsoft. I can speak from the sustainability perspective. I mean, we have this innovation fund, and so there are criteria, and it's a pretty simple process, just going to the website to submit interest, and that kind of starts a process of review. So that's one way. I mean, a lot earlier, the conversation was pretty interesting when I was talking about skills, and I'd love to spend a little time talking about that and the training, because we've been spending a lot of time thinking about how we upskill our workforce for our sustainability and frankly our twin sustainability digital goals, and how we can help our customers. Last week we released a report where we're looking at the sustainability skills, and what was really interesting, we looked at 15 companies who are kind of large companies, and they're advanced in their journey. and we looked at all of their employees that have sustainability in their title to understand what skills that they have and where they got them. And 68% of the employees that were surveyed were homegrown. So they were looking internally. So that was one interesting data point. And the other is 40% of them have only been working in sustainability for 3 years. And so it's interesting that they've learned this on the job, that is coming homegrown, which we know is a great, quick strategy, but it's not a strategy that scales. So as part of the report, we talked about 3 different areas, and this is pretty relevant to small and medium businesses, because the recommendations of how do we upskill this workforce and how do we make sure that interested future employees have the opportunity to gain the skills they need for this space. And the first is that we need a common definition of what jobs are needed, what skills are needed, and what credentials get you that skills so that we can all work off the same page. 2 is that we need to develop materials in order to be able to upskill our current workforce, where it's on Microsoft Solution Center, LinkedIn Learning. I know there's so many other different opportunities, the CSISL program. But the third piece is that we all need to be partnering together to make sure that we're putting sustainability skills and sustainability fluency earlier in our education system. And that's going to be something that we need to do around the world. Education is quite different, but making sure that we're coming up with these strategies so that we're developing that workforce, both for SMEs, for the SMEs that work with Microsoft and large companies, and for the startup ecosystem to be able to really flourish.
I think my next question, just to build up on that, is what do you think the opportunities lies for SMEs who take leadership stances and support innovation on decarbonizing? So you've mentioned that you work with sustainable fuel. Lots of them are from SMEs. So I was wondering, what would be your advice for those SMEs really championing in this area?
I think it's being a first mover. It's being a first mover when it comes to all of these areas are new, in the way that many of these jobs are new. We didn't have carbon accountants. We didn't have renewable energy procurement 10 years ago. We didn't have carbon removal procurement 2 years ago. It's being a first mover to be able to supply the goods and the services that companies are going to be able to need, and to be able to produce these technologies that frankly are going to scale so quickly that they're going to soon not be SMEs anymore.
Falling apart, so it still works. That's great. Yeah, I think I definitely agree, and I think if we think back 10 years and think about what 4G did for us, so what were the SMEs then? It was Spotify, it was sort of Storytel, a lot of the companies that are both in the financial sector, in sort of the media business, everything, because 4G was really the smartphone when we started sort of bringing everything. And think about all the dematerialization that happened and all the savings that we have done. Because, I mean, as a nerdy fact person, according to the ITU, it's not 4% that our industry emits, it's 1.4%. So it's drastically smaller. But anyway, I think that what we can do with that, and what we see now with 5G and AI, will do the same thing across industries, across transport, energy, for buildings, everywhere. And there are so many things that will happen. And we are working with a lot of SMEs in this area. A small one that is working on building, controlling the ventilation. If we talk here at COP, everybody that talks about building thinks about insulation, double glazing, retrofitting, changing to heat pumps. Takes a lot of time, costs a lot of money. Only by sort of controlling the ventilation systems that we have with smart solutions based on the whatever it is, how many people that are in the building at the same time, and how it's used, also turning it off, looking at weather data and so on. You can save 15 to 20% of the energy from day one. That is much, much faster. Using the technology and sort of transitioning now will give a much bigger thing. And all of that is driven from innovations on these technology platforms, like the mobile wallet so I think what 5G will do for industry is huge, and there are so many opportunities if we drive the digitalization right. And then SMEs will be the ones that will drive it.
Yeah, thanks. I think I'm really glad you touched upon on the innovation. And at this COP, when I walked around, I feel like there's a lot of conversations and a buzz around innovation in various sectors. I was in the food pavilion yesterday, and there was water pavilion. There was a global innovation hub as well. And it's also the first time I met a group of climate tech founders and CEOs at COP27. So I'm really glad this seems like there is really strong buzz or increasing conversation around innovation. But still, I've heard from the tech founders, they tell me, no, that's not enough. So they still think that policy, there isn't a conducive policy environment for them. They have lots of barriers when it comes to fundraising, to scale up their solutions. Lots of them, their products are not, haven't got that competitive advantage when it comes to price. So I know despite all the positive things happening, we still have a long way to go. So I think my last question to both of you is, what would you like to see as a key outcome from this COP27 that could really support the startup SMEs and also support on the innovation?
I think it's been interesting when we step back and you think about COP26, there was pledges everywhere, right? Every company, every country, governments were making pledges. And then everyone was focused, as you said, on this COP on implementation. Obviously, COP28 needs to be focused on more implementation and deeper implementation. But I have been struck by walking around and hearing that the conversation has moved on. It's not about net zero targets. It's about the hard work. It sometimes might be a little less sexy, but the hard work about how do we train our workforce? How do we scale markets? How do we bring these costs down? How do we send these demand signals? What specific types of policies? So I feel that and also most importantly, how do we make sure this is inclusive in the global north, and frankly, probably most important, enabling the transition in the global south. And I think what I really hope comes away is how do we collaborate to do those and those enablers on markets, on policy, on skills, and how do we kind of, the same way we went away from Glasgow and began to turn pledges into progress, how do we make sure that this work doesn't just happen in the US, it doesn't just happen in the UK, it doesn't just happen in the European Union, but we're really doing it truly and authentically in the global south?
I think there is money available for SMEs. I think the problem is that you don't know where and how to find it. I think that is one of the things that we need to solve in a way, and maybe we can do that through the Climate Hub. How sort of I know that there are sort of lots of World Bank, IFC, and others that are creating these challenges and innovation things. And there is, I mean, I was on a panel yesterday with the Swedish Export Credit, and they sort of fund SMEs and are glad to do that in a way. So I think it's also a way of sort of finding where the money is and sort of, because they can take away the risk, so then you can invest in SMEs and have local investments in SMEs. So I think that is there. I think, to be perfectly honest, one of the biggest hindrance for everything is really the subsidies to oil and gas industry. I mean, there are lots of innovations, lots of good ideas, but as long as we sort of keep on subsidizing the big infrastructure, it's hard to sort of get through with your new ideas. So I think the subsidies is really like a wet cloth on a lot of things, including SMEs. So I think that is one of the key policies. And then, of course, as we heard earlier, a lot of these new innovations are happening in the digital sphere. So then we need to secure that digital inclusion is driven and that sort of infrastructure for digital solutions are there, and that needs to also be taken care of.
Yeah, I like you to talk about the subsidies. We need to let the true cost, comes out. And I think that's probably a perfect note to end on. Thank you both very much for your time and sharing your insights with us. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Elliot to summarize for this session. Thanks very much, Matt.
Thank you, Xi. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Michelle. A great final panel for a great session. I appreciate all the speakers and contributors today, both those present in the room, but also those who contributed beforehand. I think it's been a really fascinating conversation. As I sort of look back over the conversation that we've had, it feels like we've talked through the whole ecosystem of the journey. I mean, we've really tried to shine a spotlight on the practical solutions, the practical actions that business can and are taking, and how they can scale up. But also in particular, so to think about that from the scale of the major corporates, but also the smaller companies, the smaller medium-sized companies. If I take from that last panel, one of the things I really heard there is I feel like we're in the world of the I words. We've gone from the ambition setting, the kind of the overall, the place in terms of deciding where we're going, into implementation. We have to make sure that implementation is inclusive, it's international. We have to accelerate investment, the access to finance. We have to accelerate, put the incentives in place for change. We have to provide the infrastructure. All of those kind of key changes. But really critically, there is an opportunity. So business has a key leadership role, and SMEs have a key leadership role, that they can, in many ways, be further ahead than some of the more established companies, some of the larger, less flexible companies. One of the things I took away from that conversation. I really think that's important. Sometimes when we talk about SMEs, we feel like they're the companies that we haven't managed to bring into this conversation, and often they're not involved in this conversation so far. But they will be able to, and as they start to engage and it starts to become clearer what actions they can take, I think they have a huge potential to really be that dynamic driver of change and of action. So it's been a very positive session, and education will be a key enabler of change in the business community and change in the SME community, as it helps build that skill set, build that awareness, build that change that we need to see. So a brilliant session, a brilliant set of contributions. I hope everybody has enjoyed it as much as I have. I look forward to continuing the conversation with you at future sessions as we take that conversation forward, both here and elsewhere. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.